Welcome to Modern Learning on the Air. I'm your guest host, David Kelly, and today we're digging into a topic that's changing everything in learning and development, artificial intelligence. But instead of just focusing on content creation, we're turning our attention to something closer to home, how AI is reshaping L&D. Joining us today is Josh Cavalier, founder and CEO of joshcavalier.com and author of the upcoming book, Applying AI in Learning and Development from Platforms to Performance. Josh is helping L&D teams rethink how they work with technology while keeping human-centered design at the forefront. Let's get started with our conversation. Josh, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Great to be here.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. You are at the forefront of exploring the opportunities and the risks that are associated with AI use in L&D. So can you just kick things off with where do you see the opportunities existing in learning and development as this AI revolution takes over our workplaces?
Right. I believe that there is a massive opportunity for the L&D function to move up higher into the business. And I think for the whole entire existence of learning development as a cost center, trying to prove our value, we now have this massive opportunity before us to prove that value, to be the champions of not just human performance, but also now machine performance, and being able to assist with across the whole entire business. What does it mean when humans begin working with machines in regards to the impact of the performance of the business in general? And what does that look like? And really the only way that that can essentially happen is if we begin to work down into the functions at the speed of business. And what does that look like? And how do we upskill for that? And I believe that's where we're headed. And so with that, there's a lot of work as L&D professionals that we need to do to prepare for this opportunity. Otherwise, with the collisions and the consolidation that's occurring across the tech stack, it's potentially set up to where some businesses may look at L&D as something that can be automated. And so I do have some reservations. I do have some fears as far as where things are headed in regards to that. But I do believe that now is our time. This is where we have taken the last 30, 40, or 50 years of this function, and we finally elevated up into the business to where we are able to make impacts at the speed of business.
And I agree with and appreciate your comment of the sensitivity of this time period that we're in, and there's opportunity and risk in this moment that L&D exists in. And I think that you're absolutely right that there is a huge opportunity for us to take that step forward and be more supportive of the business. But it's not going to come through efficient content generation, which is where a lot of the current energy in AI seems to be focused on, the ability for us to just do what we do in a more efficient and quick manner. What is some of the what does the day-to-day look like in your vision for an L&D professional? How are we doing things differently to harness some of the potential you were talking about?
I think it's always going back to sources of truth
Mm-hmm.
and getting good data and understanding exactly what's happening with the business and what are the impacts on knowledge, skills, and behaviors with that reality, right? And it's funny because I was talking to somebody earlier about when I first got started in this industry in the 1990s, that when there was a training potential or opportunity identified, it takes 6 to 8 months to get a CD-ROM out the door to train tellers. Well, obviously things have dramatically changed, and so now we have to be able to be proactive in what we do. And if we look at generative AI as a technology, it gives us the opportunity to create learning experiences unlike we've only dreamed about, to be able to go in and create a Socratic conversation or a bi-directional interaction that challenges an individual, that meets them where they're at, that's scalable, that's hyper personalized. We've only dreamed about doing that. That is today's reality. It's just not at scale yet. And so, and I think about starting, and I apologize, I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. I was one of those people that started the click next to continue, right? Because that is the framework that we had, and even bringing it into mobile. So apologies. But I think I'm going to make amends by introducing some new interaction types or learning types that lean into the potential of generative AI. And I think we're only just scraping the surface of being able to create truly engaging, truly transformational type experiences for individuals that, not only addresses skill, knowledge, and behavior gaps, but also being able to create experiences that, will meet people where they're at as far as like either being on the spectrum or if there's a disability or anything like that. We haven't had the time or the resources to go in and create these types of experiences that need to be there. We've talked about it, but it's always this time and resource issue. Well, with generative AI, the content creation time crashes down. And now really it's more about how do we orchestrate these experiences to truly have impact in the business.
When you were describing the future of the workplace when we started the conversation, you used the phrase that I liked a lot of work as the something to the effect of as the workplace starts moving towards people working with machines, and the word "with" is such a huge part of that for me, because when I look at how L&D professionals are playing in the AI space right now, it seems to be more often like a binary thing of either the machine's going to do it or I'm going to do it, not necessarily there. And working with a machine has that kind of co-pilot aspect to it. So, I'm an instructional designer. I'm a trainer. I do my work. What does it look like to use it as a co-pilot rather than just offloading things, which there may be some things we offload. But how does my work as an instructional designer improve when I start working with AI rather than just offloading things to it?
Yeah, we need to be careful with the language that we use, right? So for many of the conversations that we have, a lot of people use the word automation. I'm not down with that. It should be augmentation. Is really where the conversation should go. Not even just for instructional designers, but for the people that we serve within our organizations, because we are going to have this moment where we have to support individuals that are going to be working with machines, and it's fluid. It's very fluid. It's not an on-off switch. It's not human and then an AI agent. It is this weird kind of dynamic where it could be a prompt and it gets some mundane work done, and that's it. It's not an automation. It's not an agent. But then there's other workflows to where you can move up and build in workflows in automations and then eventually agents where it makes sense and risk is mitigated. And so in regards to the instructional design profession, the augmentation is going to show up many different ways, depending upon, where you are at within structuring a learning journey. And for a lot of what we do eventually, it's really going to be more about turning a dial or making adjustments in the process of being a performance consultant, gathering data, identifying what the potential issues are, maybe even working with an agent in regards to the data analysis, and then potentially using an agent to go ahead and create the learning needs analysis, and then another agent to go in and do action mapping, right? And it goes on and on. And so, but every organization is different. The way that a learning professional needs to show up with the augmentation of AI is really going to be directed by the scope and scale at which, you have potential impact, and also how does your learning ecosystem show up? What does that look like? That's really going to drive a lot of the conversation, because, what access to models that you have, what kind of platforms and tools that you have that have AI built in. And so, this relationship that learning professionals have with machines, it's going to be across the spectrum. It's going to be everything from evaluating a prompt all the way to coordinating an agent and everything in between.
Do you see any opportunities? A lot of the opportunities that I'm seeing surface right now, they tend to be still building, like you said, building an experience perspective as compared to AI's presence in it. I guess an example of what I'm curious if you see AI being embedded into facilitation itself. An example of what I mean, I was just doing a workshop online with some people last week, and we were talking about like a scenario that they were trying to work through. And I was just like, you know what? Let's take a look at it. And I literally shared my screen, put in ChatGPT, and I was like, describe it to me. And I typed it in, and I was just like, so what problems are you having? And I was like, here's the problem that they have. And it wasn't an AI demonstration. It was just you know what? That's a good question. I don't have all the context here. Let's use a tool that can help us explore this together. And it wound up pivoting to an AI discussion in a way, which was interesting. But like that was the first time and it was interesting to me because it was just like a natural thing that happened in the middle of this discussion. It wasn't a conscious facilitated thing. I was just like, oh, I have this tool that I could use that could potentially help us in this discussion. I'm curious, do you see AI emerging any other ways within like facilitation, either? I know you do a lot of in-person workshops, in person, virtually, where you're actually using these tools to enhance the facilitation of an experience.
Completely. I think it's odd is that we've spent so many years with certain platforms and certain tools to help with facilitation, right? With PowerPoint, Miro boards, live boards, polling, whiteboards, goes on and on. And I don't believe that we have given ourselves the opportunity to go and fully explore these new avenues to take information or take knowledge and then leverage generative AI to create a new type of experience when facilitating. And what does that look like? I mean, so let's take a technology like AI vision, right? The ability for the system to understand what's happening with an image. Okay, have we fully explored what that's like if we were able to go ahead and give a frontline worker on their mobile phone to take a picture of potentially a safety issue, and then from that image have the AI give a bidirectional conversation about, you know, actions that you might have to take in that situation live. We've never had that before. And so there's got to be an opportunity for this profession to explore and to understand like what the potentials are, because not everything's going to hit, right? And that's the crazy thing about facilitation. And I know that, having done stand-up instruction for decades, not everything hits. And so, I know that for myself, I try to push and challenge myself to use these tools to create new experiences or to allow my the people that I'm supporting there to be actionable and to maybe take a form of media, which could be, like an example, a recording of a session that I did, and then they get the transcript from me, but then they turn into a chat bot and they can have a conversation with me not being there over the content that we just went over. Okay, so when did we learn how to do that? We didn't. Like, these are new ways that we have to think about giving the people that we are trying to support different angles or different ways to dive in deep to that information so it is transformational. And so it's going to take time for all these new methodologies and opportunities to kind of work their way up. And when you have multimodal generative AI, where you can have different types of inputs of text, image, audio, video, 3D, sensors, and outputs of similar type, there's a lot to explore. So I think we are just really at like a golden age of facilitation and some of these new ways of going in and supporting our students or supporting our associates are going to kind of bubble up.
It's interesting. I totally agree. And as I'm thinking about what you're saying here, I find myself reflecting on that workshop I did again last week. Because one of the things when you mentioned Miro, that's another tool that I use pretty often. And like you said, we've had so many tools that have emerged in L&D that we've leveraged into our practices, but all of them have something in common that's only occurring to me now as I'm reflecting on that. Is there's usually that period when you introduce a tool to, okay, let me show you how to use this tool for this experience. Here's the Miro board. Here's how you interact with it. Here's this virtual training tool. Here's how you interact with it. And it's dawning on me, like last week when I shared my screen, I didn't tell anyone how to do anything. I prefaced it as just kind of, let's see if this works. This might be helpful. And I shared my screen and we were talking about things and I was typing it in. They weren't using it themselves because it was literally in the moment screen share. But there was no explanation. It was just something that we just did, and it provided value. I'm wondering if there's that element to some of these tools that are emerging, is just kind of they're so conversational in nature. And so I want this, so give me this in terms of the requests that are there, that it'll make, that might be one of the ways that we are enhancing our engagement, is just reducing the barrier of entry for people to participate in the experiences that we're creating.
It's a great insight. And I think you nailed it, because we're in a period now where there's so much noise. There's so much distraction, just in general, like in life in general. And from an instructional standpoint, to be able to give these interaction types where there's clarity, where there's simplicity, but there's maximum value, that's where we need to land. And, when you investigate different types of, different ways of working with these systems, we haven't really thought about the audio or speaking as a UX UI capability, like bidirectional.
Yeah.
That's completely in play. And where does that lead us, and where does that go? And that, again, how much experience do we have with bidirectional video-based chatbots? Zero. None. And so would that be a simple interaction? It seems like it would be. And I think, again, we are so far beyond click next to continue. We are now in this point where, as you mentioned, like the simplicity, the elegance, the ease of use is going to start showing up. And I believe, and to your point, like those are the patterns, like those are the things that we need to gravitate towards as a community and as a profession, through sharing and through talking about failures, about these different types of interactions. And that's where these new methods of facilitation and teaching are going to show up.
So there's a lot of potential in everything we're discussing, and even what you're just saying there. The thought that is bouncing around in my head is, but we've got to get out of our own way, because there's one of the reasons I love your feed, and if you're watching this video or listening to this podcast, follow Josh on LinkedIn if you're interested in AI, because one of the reasons I love your feed is you break through what I always refer to as the baggage of what is, of like you're not looking at it through the lens of how do I do what I do with this new AI tool that's here. You're kind of breaking through all that and be like, oh my gosh, we can I mean, usually I try to stay away from words like transform or things, because we've been using them for ages to describe things that aren't really that transformative. But I do feel it's different this time, because you think about some of this stuff that this is enabling, and it truly is transforming a lot of what we do. But it starts with that mindset. That's one of the reasons I love your feed, is you've got it's very apparent, you've got an open mind to all possibilities that you're exploring when you look at these tools, not just what we do, but what we could be doing. How do you build that mindset of seeing what the opportunities are rather than just the low-hanging fruit or what you have to do on a daily basis?
I always go back to the problem. What are we trying to solve? At the end of the day, what are we attempting to do with our profession, with the people that we serve? And that's where I'm grounded in. And what's the straightest line from point A to point B? Right? And just so happens that point A to point B, there has been massive barriers because we have not been able to scale human to human coaching, mentorship, apprenticeship, partnership, we now have that ability, right? And I keep that in mind when anybody is attempting to leverage AI, but in an old methodology, and be like, why are you attempting to scale? Click next to continue. And I keep bringing it up. It's an easy target. Why are we doing that? Like, please use your time and use your effort to redefine what is possible. How do we get from point A to point B to help these individuals out with in the moment, like, in the moment of need, or in the macro level with their whole career? Because this is what's going to happen. We have this new reality where machines and humans, this dynamic of working together, the learning and development function evolves and changes to help facilitate and help manage that relationship. Because again, thinking about the people that we serve, the humans, now have to go in and work with agents or control agents or train models or whatever the case may be. How do we continue to improve the human part of that? Man, there's a whole bunch of new skills and capabilities that we as professionals need to gravitate towards. And I'm thinking about the mental part, like psychological safety and all of that. But again, what problem are we trying to solve? How do we get from point A to point B and not get stuck with what has been defined as a solution, and break out of that so that we can, most effectively help individuals out, help our companies out at the speed and the velocity that's required to continue moving things forward, whether it be for the whole organization or for an individual who, may be in the middle of their career and they're asking themselves the question, do I need to learn AI? Do I need to go ahead and learn about these new systems? That's where we need to be.
One of the challenges of getting to where you're describing, one of the things I've been in this field a similar time frame as you. I mentioned it to my daughter recently, and she was kind enough to point out, "Wow, you've been in this field since the last century," which I appreciate. Um,
The 1900s.
yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. It made it worse. I'm not going to give that to her. So, well, one of the things that's different for me as compared to some of the other technological innovations that you and I have seen in our careers is that this one is bigger than L&D. This one is much bigger than L&D. We look at it sometimes through the lens of L&D, but this is transforming like work. This is transforming everything within an organization, and L&D is going to need to support that. So there's the lens of don't just look internally. You got to look at what's going on. If our job is to support the workforce and the way work is being done is changing, we need to adapt to that in addition to our own practices. But it starts getting into things. I sometimes see people asking questions about L&D's use of these tools, and questions that are bigger than the L&D. Like, we can't necessarily answer them. We need to be part of a bigger answer, like ethics, like the ethics of using AI. A lot of people are like, well, how do we use this ethically? I'm like, you need to be part of a bigger discussion. How do you see, what is, in your opinion, as someone who's very deep in this space, what's AI's role in the ethics for AI part of the discussion?
Right. So, there's many different issues at play, and we have a technology that's rapidly advancing forward, but we don't have the governance that needs to be in place at, the global level. You can take it all the way down, federal, state, it goes on and on. There's still decisions to be made in courts in regards to copyright. There's still a lot of issues in regards to representation, to access. Many issues. And recently, a lot of people are asking me, what do you think about the environmental impact of data centers? Right? It goes on and on. It is mostly a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have And as we discussed, this opportunity to raise human performance to levels we've never seen before. Same thing with efficiencies of business. But on the other hand, we have essentially the atomic bomb sitting out there. And all it takes is some nefarious character to go in and leverage one of these powerful systems to do a heavy amount of damage. Are we advocating the advancement of this technology without these guardrails for the sake of money? That's what it seems to be. So I would say, because a lot of people are like, well, what can I do? Where can I make an impact? And you always start with your leaders and the people who are your representatives and making sure that they are working towards laws and guardrails and protections across the board. So these ethical issues, we can move forward with it. But we're in a very precarious time. There's no doubt about it. And I don't believe that we are at the point where we need to be with laws, with protections, with representation, with the environment. And there needs to be a lot of work there. No, there's much more work to be done. And my hope is that, and I do have hope. I'm an optimist, right? So when I first started talking about AI full time, right? Well, I was checking to see exactly how many bills were in committee on AI in 2022, 2023. There was only 8. Now there's over 120. So we're not the only ones thinking about it. There are other people thinking about the impact. I know that that just went through the Senate and Congress. There is an act, I can't remember the name of it, for deep fakes and pornography.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. And I think there was only like 2 people that voted. I don't even know why they'd vote against it. We need more of that. Not this reactive state of, oh, this is a problem, now we need laws. It's got to be the other way around. But there's got to be balance, because you hear about the activity in California and New York, the AI Act in Europe, and there's got to be a balance to where, from a business standpoint, these labs can go ahead and continue to advance the technology, but not to the point of destruction, not to the point of where it's dangerous. And so where do we strike that balance? I don't have an answer to that, but I do know there needs to be definitely more activity in regards to those guardrails.
Do you recommend that L&D professionals, obviously we can only impact it so much, but it sounds like you follow that space to kind of see where the waves and the winds are blowing, because there could be something that happens that changes the trajectory of where things are going very much. So should we just be following and kind of building an awareness on what's going on globally around the implementation of these tools?
Well, you personally have a decision to make how good of a citizen you want to be, right? Some people, they jump in, and some people stand on the sidelines. And I've always said that this is always a conversation about the relationship between you and technology. And where do you stand with that? The only thing is that this has changed. Like we've had this relationship with it to where it has changed commerce. It's changed the way that we go on vacations, the way that we go about our day. And it's only from an exponential standpoint escalating. And so there's a different dynamic that's forming. And that in turn brings up different levels of conversations that we've never had before. And so one of the things I talk about with organizations that I work with is, and this is both in corporate and in universities, is being able to create a space where everyone who's involved can freely talk about the impact of AI on themselves personally and as an entity. Let's just go away from corporate. Let's talk about universities, right?
Mhm.
And so from a pedagogical standpoint, you have this, everyone's rocked because, if students are cheating and tenured instructors don't know how to change their instruction in the age of AI. It goes on and on. And the only way that you can break through and make progress is by having everybody in the room and creating a space to where ideas, fears, opportunity, everything can get discussed. Because if you keep it to yourself, there's no way things are going to get resolved, and you're going to have a minority making decisions that affect the majority. And we cannot have that with AI. And so, well, it's like, why are you cheating? Is it you have too much of a course load? You don't understand why the topic is important? Like, we got to get down to the reason why. And once we get down to the reason why, instructors can then change the structure of their course to meet the students where they're at. And it's the same thing in business. Like, if you don't create, it's like the letters from the CEOs of Spotify and a couple other companies putting their fist down saying, we are now an AI company. It's either you fall in line or you can get out of the way. That's not inclusive. Like, how are you going to run a business if you're forcing AI on an individual that has a problem with it? They're an artist and they don't appreciate other people's work being used to train a model, and they don't want to use AI. Is that part of the conversation or not? Do they have a choice or not? And so that's the position that we're in now. And so I advocate for these spaces that conversations can be had, concerns can be raised, and solutions can be created together across whatever organization or entity it is.
It's a great segue to where I wanted to close our conversation, because we were talking about ethics and risks and copyright, these huge discussions that are global discussions, not L&D department within an organization discussions. They're global. We got to figure this out as a culture, as a society, questions that are there. But then you pivoted, taking that theme into a university or an organization, and in a practical way. So, and I want to take that theme into the closing question here, because there are a lot of people who are feeling overwhelmed by the entire AI conversation, that it's moving so fast and it's so big and so disruptive that they feel like they're being asked to jump on a treadmill that's already running at 20 miles an hour. So what are you've been working with all sorts of organizations and you've been in this space very deep. One of the things that I would recommend to people is to you don't have time to be an AI expert. Find people who are, like Josh, and let them distill it there. So that's one thing I would recommend. But what are some of the things that you would recommend that people do so they can start small, so they can start onboarding themselves to the future of what L&D looks like in this AI world?
Well, it's interesting because I was going to go ahead and I knew where you're going with this, and I was going to answer it at the individual level. But last night I was had a conversation with people in my community, and that's it right there. Is you got to find your community. Like, you got to find your people. And what I mean by that is you're going to find individuals that are in the same boat, and you're stronger together. I don't know where I got that saying from, but like, you need to be able to find your people and work together as opposed to working by yourself. Now, if you don't have that luxury, uh, I'd recommend leaning into your expertise. What I mean by that is you're a professional and you understand what that means and the quality and the integrity behind it. When you begin to work with AI, when you begin to work with the system and you see results, you see work that's coming back, lean into that. Like, lean into the tasks that you do day in and day out so you can evaluate that and then become better at working with the system. And then as you begin to build those proficiencies, you can begin to expand those areas in which you work with it. Because I think the real confusion, well, it's like me going in and wanting to write a contract with AI.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it looks really darn good, But you know what? I'm still calling my lawyer up to look that contract over, right? Because that's not my flywheel. That's not my area of expertise. Like, lean into your expertise. And then also find that community. I think the combination of both of those really helps out with individuals that are just getting started, because you are you're putting the focus back in on yourself as opposed to the technology. And then also you're finding the people who you can work with and do it as a group together, as opposed to just being out there by yourself.
I love that. I think it's a great place to close the conversation, because, I mean, throughout the theme of our discussion here, we're not talking about L&D being replaced. We're talking about elevating L&D in a world of AI. And when we start balancing out the technological part, what's balancing out is the human part, the community part, connecting with individuals and meeting people where they are. So I think that's a great place to close the conversation. And I think that community, connecting with the community, finding those experts, I think you are an excellent resource to do just that. I mentioned a couple of times, people should be finding you on LinkedIn to follow everything you feed. You're very active on there, sharing with you. So if you're not following Josh already, I encourage you to do so. Josh, what else do you have in the queue? Where can people find you, and other resources that you have available that people can?
Yeah, I will be out and about at many conferences. I am busy with the conference, L&D conference circuit. So I'm usually out speaking there. Also, you can find me at joshcavalier.com. And as of this recording, I do have a book coming out in November of 2025, applying AI in L&D from platforms to performance. I just got the typeset copy yesterday, and believe me, I'm beyond excited. I cannot wait for this thing to drop. But in the meantime, if you want to know more about what's in the book, then just follow me, and then you get little drips and dribbles of it.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate everything that you do for the community. I learn from you on a daily basis, and I appreciate and thank you for taking some time to share your wisdom with us here today.
Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, that was a fascinating conversation that seemed to move at the speed of AI, and I want to thank Josh again so much for sharing his insights with us. Our conversation serves as a reminder that AI is not here to replace L&D. It's here to elevate it, especially in the live virtual space where human connection is so critical. Now, for listeners who want to take the next step, register for InSync Training's AI-Augmented Learning webinar and receive the free tip sheet, 30 Ways AI Can Elevate Instructional Design, Facilitation, and Virtual Production. A link to register is in the description below. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have thoughts on today's discussion or ideas for topics for future episodes, let us know by dropping that in the comments. And be sure to stay on top of all things InSync Training by clicking the subscribe button and clicking the notifications button to make sure you never miss an upcoming episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to Modern Learning on the Air, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning into Modern Learning on the Air. For all your training and services needs, visit us at insynctraining.com. And don't forget to sign up for our monthly webinars, where we cover key topics and trends in the learning and development space. Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.